What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Five Pod, episode number 118. I'm, of course, your co-host, Kyle Morello. Next to me, nodding his head because, hell yeah, dude, 118 episodes. Jake Coapstick. How we doing?
Doing well, Kyle. I'm a bit more well rested. I'll be honest with you, ever since last Monday night, like I haven't watched any of the NBA playing. I haven't tuned into one of the NBA games. First time I think in my life I haven't watched like sat down to watch a single Sixers game all year.
You
Probably
picked
picked
a
a good
good
year to
year.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, picked a good year to do it, but I haven't watched a full length Phillies game yet. Like I need a minute to breathe here. So trying to like sleep right, go to the gym, like kind of eat healthy, like do things that a normal, like healthy person would. And not it's only sleep, here and there and be running around like a chicken with your head cut off going to games. So I think I'm succeeding at that quite a bit, but I need a break.
I
I need a
get it.
break. And of course, with the transfer portal and coaching stuff, we're not really getting that much of one. It's a substantial one because obviously there's no hoops on, but it's enough to get your rest. It's also enough to keep you entertained.
It's true. It's true. And when it gets to like June through August, that's when that's when we don't have a whole lot to talk
Yeah,
about.
we're
You'll
shut.
see less of us, just to be completely honest. In June through August, you'll see a lot less of us. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, at some point we'll take a break in full and take a few weeks and get our head on straight here to get toward the 2025-26 season. But for right now, Cope, preparations are already being made for that for these college basketball teams that we're talking about. So we're gonna get right into it because there's a lot going on still. Not quite as much as last week or the week before. Or really like the last, months, but in terms of the offseason stuff, not like the last couple of weeks. But we do have some things we want to talk about. So, Cope, why don't we get right into it? Why don't we start off with your quick hitters, of course? So grab that ball. Oh, you got it ready. You're set in stone. We're ready to go here. Why not run that break? Let's do it.
All right, yeah, let's do it. A lot short. I mean, yesterday, last episode, excuse me, when I got up to do quick hitters. I mean, I think I read the entirety of the Bible when I was up there. I mean, I had a shitload
Something
to
like that.
talk about. But good thing is, I don't have to talk as much. You don't have to hear my voice as much when I go this week because there's not as much. Kyle, we'll start out with some coaching news. There's a big one we'll talk about. Big enough to the point where it's not something we're going to group into here. But one coaching note here is Fran McCaffrey continues to fill out his coaching staff at Penn. He did name one of his other assistant coaches, which is Ronald Moore, a guy he's got a lot of familiarity with. Not in the coaching ranks, but Ronald Moore was his point guard at Siena in the, like 2005, 2009, that area when Fran McCaffrey was going on that great run at Siena. They had won 20 plus games. They made 3 straight tournaments in the MAC. 97 wins Ronald Moore, Fran McCaffrey had when they were the head coach point guard tandem of the Saints. So a lot of success and experience they have with each other in that realm. However, Ronald Moore, this is his first college coaching job. So clearly Fran McCaffrey sees enough in him to be able to bring him on and do that. He doesn't have any college coaching experience, like I said, but he runs the Moore Brothers basketball, which runs camps, leagues, AAU teams. He still is around the game, training people, running leagues and stuff like that. Certainly still very much around basketball, of course. Had a professional career. He retired in 2021, has been doing his thing, coaching basketball up until then. But a guy who is going to get his start at Penn under a guy that he had played under and he will now coach under. Couple notes here. He's from Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. He went to Plymouth White Marsh High School. That's the alma mater of my mother, my Uncle Tommy, my Uncle Vince, and my cousin Courtney. So I
Oh,
grew up going to a couple of games there. I know my one of my uncles would want to check in on them. So I saw him play at Widener one year. Saw him play a couple games. I think they played at the elementary school there, but regardless, like very, very good high school basketball program in the area. Plymouth White Marsh High School. He is the cousin of John Salmons, Kyle, who played at Miami. He played
yep.
for the Sixers, was 1,000-point scorer at PW. And the thing you got to know about Ronald Moore, Kyle, if you ask, somebody posted this on Twitter, they asked Bill Raftery, they said, what's your favorite Onions call? And he said, Ronald Moore, when he hit the shot to send they beat Ohio State coached by Thad Matta and Evan Turner. Think of the CN out of the MAAC, was a 9 seed.
Yep.
They beat Ohio State. Ronald Moore hit a clutch three to send it to double overtime and then hit a clutch three to win it for them in double overtime. And Bill Raftery said his favorite Onions call of all time was when he said, "Onions, double order," for Ronald Moore to beat Ohio State in that game. So how about that? He called the Jalen Suggs Onions with a kiss when they beat UCLA in Indianapolis in front of like a 25% crowd in a football stadium. He called the Chris Jenkins some major onions when he hit the shot for the national championship game. But it's Ronald Moore, Kyle, that he said was his favorite one. So he'll now be on the sidelines at the Palestra, not playing, but on the bench next to the guy that coached him in his college tenure. I'll move on to some recruiting news. Two unfortunate notes here. So Dante Allen, who had committed to Villanova and then decommitted in the wake of the coaching change and the firing of Kyle Neptune, he kept Villanova an option as Kevin Willard transitioned to be the head coach. But he's a Miami native and he's from Florida. His father, Malik, played at Villanova as an assistant coach of the Miami Heat. He's going to be staying close to home, Kyle. He is committed to Miami and Jay Lucas, who, when you look at it, Kyle, that Miami team was awful last year.
Yeah, no, they were not good.
Coming, you had Jim Larinaga retire mid-season. It was a lost year for them. But Jay Lucas is one of the best recruiters nationally. Young guy, up-and-comer, was Duke's kind of defensive coordinator, if you will, this year. So he's got Malik Allen now, top 50 recruit in this year's class. He brought in Trey Donaldson, the lightning-quick point guard from Michigan. He brought in Ernest Uday, who actually Duke tried to get when he was there. Now gets a shot at him as Ernest Uday transfers from TCU. And he also got Malik Renew from Indiana. So putting quite the team together, Malik Allen becomes Jay Lucas's first high school recruit. Unfortunately, that means he will not be a Villanova next year. Kyle, another guy that's not going to be in the Big Five next year. So I believe it was 2 weeks ago, Cam Miles decommitted from Temple, the IMG player. He's committed to Florida State. I was right church, wrong pew on this one. I told you look out for South Florida because Brian Hodgson had offered him at Arkansas State, and Cam Miles also held an offer from South Florida before Brian Hodgson got there. He's staying in state, where IMG is, being in Bradenton, Florida. But he's going to go to Florida State. He's going to play for Luke Locks, who took over the assistant from the Sacramento Kings. He'll be playing with Kobe McGee, who just came over from Drexel there. So unfortunate that we're talking about two guys here that won't be playing in the Big Five, but Cam Miles literally made that decision today that he was going to play at Florida State. And you have to think like, hey, probably a big pay bump here, gets to play in a power conference. Good for him. Sure, there's a whole lot of perks, of course, to moving up a level and then I own a payday and stuff. So he decided to revoke his commitment from Temple, keep his options open. Sure enough, found a spot for him in a better league, probably with some more money. So was down to Temple, Marshall, East Carolina. He chose the Owls. That was for sometime this school year, sometime this semester. So say a handful of months. Unfortunately, he's decommitted, is headed to Florida State. Kyle, we did have a commitment, though. We did have a freshman commitment at that. How about that? William Kruse from Norway and the Oscar Aliens of the Norwegian BLNO, the top league in Norway, as an 18-year-old was playing in it. He has committed to the University of Pennsylvania and the Penn Quakers and Fran McCaffrey. How about that? Yeah. So the front court was certainly a need for this team. Whether I know Michelangelo Berti had put his name in the portal, Nick Spinoso obviously graduated, exhausted his eligibility. Even with all that, and I think there's a shot that O'Berty's going to come back. So he was at Fran McCaffrey's press conference, but with his return or not, the front court and the 5 spot was a massive need for Penn. They've addressed that with the commit. They've got TJ Power, who we'll talk about later when we get to the transfer portal. But this is big to get a young guy, a true 7-footer. He blocked over a shot a game in Norway, also a 36% three-point shooter. And when you look at Penn's team, Braden Foster's not a floor spacer. Augie Gerhardt's not a floor spacer. Johnny Walter is, but he didn't play as much as the aforementioned guys. And he's more of a 4, certainly, than a 5. So this gives him a true 5 who can block shots that Nick Spinoso leaving. Obviously, it leaves a void there, and a floor spacer at the 5 spot that they did not have. So perhaps fits more into the Fran McCaffrey style of play, but albeit an exciting addition, guy who's played professionally, is now going to be at Penn next year. So William Crusoe coming to University City next year. Kyle, two more quick ones. We always like to talk about Big Five transfers committing elsewhere. We'll just mention them real quick as they come in, because we'll talk about the guys that are coming in, the guys that are going out. We'll save a section here in quick hitters just to touch on briefly. But Demetrius Lilly from LaSalle, guy we had on the pod in the summer, He just committed to Binghamton, averaged 7.7 points and 5.8 rebounds in his one and only season. On 20th and only playing for Fran Dunphy, spent 2 years at Penn State prior. From Philadelphia. Sucks to see him go, but hey, new head coach comes in there. Everything's on the table. Darius Nichols and his staff, we'll get into it, have really hit the transfer portal hard, done a good job, but he put his name in the portal, still staying regionally, albeit a 4.5 maybe hour drive straight up the Northeast Extension will get you to Binghamton, but he is headed up there to play his fourth season. And then, Kyle, how about some Hall of Fame news? Don't get to always talk about this, but this came out today. I thought this was worth mentioning and really cool. The 1985 Villanova men's basketball championship team. They're going to be inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame in November at Live Casino. Of course, that team, they beat Patrick Ewing and John Thompson's Georgetown team in the national championship, which is the first one for the Villanova men's basketball program. Obviously coached by legend Rollie Massimino, led by Captain Easy Ed Pinckney. Pretty cool induction, though. They're going to be inducted amongst a slew of other people across multiple sports in the city. But Gary Williams, who's from Collingswood, New Jersey, won a national championship at Maryland. Dick Girardi, who did such a good job covering the Philadelphia sports scene and specifically college hoops. And then how about this, Kyle? Jeff Lurie from the Eagles going to be there as well. He's getting inducted. So pretty cool that this whole team, not just one person, not just the coach, one player, this whole team is going to get inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. So for an all-time team in Philly, for that won the first national championship for an all-time program and one of the most notorious in college basketball, really, really cool that these guys are going to be inducted forever into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame. So with that, Kyle, the big story tonight is what?
Xzayvier Brown and Justin Scott leaving Hawk Hill to take their towns to Norman, Oklahoma. Yes, Xzayvier Brown and Justin Scott are leaving St. Joe's, and they've committed to Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma, under Porter Moser. Justin Scott will be an associate, or not, he was the associate head coach at St. Joe's. Now he's going to be an assistant head coach under Porter Moser and his staff there. And of course, probably the biggest portion of this is Xzayvier Brown leaving St. Joe's after a year in which he was a first-team All-A-10 member. He scored over 1,000 points in his 2 seasons at Hawk Hill. Cope, he was kind of on a similar pace that Eric Reynolds was to scoring record-wise. He very well, if he would have stayed, could have gotten there. It was going to be an all-time St. Joe's career. Could have potentially been in the running for Player of the Year in the A-10 this year. It's disappointing. I'm not going to say it's 100% surprising, and I'll get your thoughts on it in a second. But Cope, a lot of questions here. First of all, who's going to take over now for Xzayvier Brown? Because obviously you knew that Reynolds was going to be gone because he didn't have any eligibility left, although that doesn't matter for some people, as we'll get into, trying to get another year of extrability in the transfer portal. You knew he was going to be gone. You knew Rasheer Fleming was going to declare for the draft, because if you're going to be a potential lottery pick, go get your money. Even though NIL is, good and people can make money in this day and age, go get your money. The NBA money is real. This was the person who was supposed to lead the Hawks the next at least year, if not 2, into the next phase of this St. Joe's team under Billy Lang. Now that's not going to happen. So who replaces him? Could it be Deuce Jones going over from one Philly A-10 school to the other? He visited there, posted a picture on Instagram in his St. Joe stuff, but hashtag not committed was one of the comments. And I've been seeing that lately throughout college basketball. Xavier Lee actually just did it with Florida, except he actually committed today on this recording on Wednesday. So maybe it's a sign that they're going to get the talented A-10 freshman of the year and keep him in conference, which would be a huge get. But besides that, Cope, where do they go? How do they replace Justin Scott, who was the associate head coach and was responsible, of course, bringing Xzayvier Brown in, but also other guys as well, and was a phenomenal head coach in his own right. Cope was at Arcadia just a few years ago. Now he's going to be coaching in the Big 12, which is kind of crazy. Do they
SEC, brother.
SEC? Yes.
Yeah,
It's still so weird.
it's
They
all right.
they
You get a year. You should have a year. Like
I
seeing
think we
the
get a
Big
year.
12 logo like on Arizona or UCF's court. Like it's
It's
weird.
weird.
You get
It's
a year.
weird. The conference real. I wish we could go back to 2009 and just do those conferences. That's when college sports were at its peak for conferences. Anyway, that's a whole other tangent for another episode. But who takes over for Justin Scott? Could it be Dwayne Jones? Does he get promoted to associate head coach? Could it be one of Billy Lang's old friends, or maybe someone else who's coached in the city, like a Mike Nardi? Could it be someone like that? Who knows, Cope? There's a lot of questions that can be answered here, and I don't know if we have them right now. If I had to say what my first definitive answer for any of these things would be, I do think Deuce Jones being on Hawk Hill is a very real possibility, though he's also getting a couple high major offers as well from Butler, and it was from Wake Forest, right? So high major offers there. He's got a chance to either play in the Big East or the ACC, which is pretty cool. But Cope, what happens here? We'll start, since we were just talking about Deuce Jones a little bit for a second, I can let you get to that in the second portion of your answer. Let's start with Justin Scott first. Obviously a big loss in the coaching staff. He was kind of their special teams coordinator. And we had him on last year, and he was explaining everything that he did in terms of, out of bounds plays, late game situations, but also obviously a very good recruiter and a very good coach in his own right too. So how does Billy Lang replace him on the bench?
Yeah, before I start there, like, just want to say, like, that's you mentioned he was at Arcadia. Like, think about that for a second. 6 years ago, he was the head coach of Division III school, and now he's going to be on the bench for a team in the best league in the country. That's impressive for him, and it's a hell of an opportunity that you have to take. And for Xzayvier Brown, that's an opportunity you have to take to be a starting point guard for a team that just made the tournament and is in the best league in the country. And we can get further into that. But as far as Justin Scott, how do you replace him? There's two ways I see it happening. I think when you look at how Billy has done things, like, hey, John Linehan was the associate head coach. He leaves to go to BYU. Or, excuse me, first it was John Griffin III. He takes the head coaching job at Bucknell, slides everybody up the bench. John Linehan becomes his associate head coach. John Linehan leaves to go to BYU this year. Justin Scott takes his spot. And then you even look at support staff members, guys becoming assistant coaches. Thomas Boyle got promoted to assistant coach this year. Philip Lawrence Ricks got a promotion. Chris Flegler got a promotion. Like, if history tells us anything, it will be an internal promotion. And that, to me, the person that is most equipped to do that and slide into that spot is Dwayne Jones. Obviously an all-time player, was on that 2003 to 2004 team that made the Elite Eight, but also was with Billy Lang with the Sixers for a little bit, and now has been on Hawk Hill for a little bit as an assistant. So if you're looking at strictly body of work and coaching experience, Dwayne Jones is that guy who can slide up into that role. However, I believe he will go external here for somebody who could not only bolster the staff in a way that Justin Scott did as a lead recruiter, recruiting coordinator guy. Not to say the other guys don't have that, but I think with his departure, you need to bring in somebody like that, whether it's somebody who's really good at recruiting the DMV, where they've gotten guys, really good at recruiting the Philadelphia area, New York. I think that's the way they go. And I think it's going to be somebody who's got more experience than they have currently on staff. So whether that be somebody you brought up like Donahue or somebody in the Philly area that maybe has a lot of assistant coaching or head coaching experience, could be somebody feasible. I think they'll go external for this, though. Who that is, that remains to be seen as far as they can interview people. Like, is that going to be public? But me personally, even though the history says they'll move up, they'll promote from within, which is a really good way of doing things, I just think for this spot, at this time in the program where they're losing the all-time leading scorer, they're losing Xzayvier Brown, who is on pace to be the all-time leading scorer and an all-time Hawk. Like, at a time now where you need an experienced guy who can bring players in, I think this is where you go external here. Who that is, we will see. But I think this is the one time where at a spot like this where he needs to hire an associate and hire his right hand man, I think it's going to come externally this time. But that's a big loss. As good as a recruiter as there is on the East Coast in Justin Scott.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Cope, to the players now, not to put you back on the spot again so quickly, but talked about Deuce Jones being a replacement. There's still a bunch of names left in the portal, and I don't know all of them at this very moment. I'm not looking at the portal at this very moment, but there's a lot. I don't want to say a lot. There's still some top end talent in the portal right now. I know Swoop from St. Louis put his name in on the day of this recording on Wednesday. There's still some guys who can make an impact at the guard position who could replace him. Obviously, Deuce Jones is one of them, though I'm sure not quite as high as some other people's lists in terms of high majors who have entered the portal. But who do you see both logically and maybe outside the box, if there's one of those that are kind of in that upper echelon that maybe they can scrape together some NIL money and bring someone in, because St. Joe's does have a pretty decent NIL cabinet? Who's someone that you'd be looking at to replace Xzayvier Brown in the backcourt for St. Joe's?
So yeah, Deuce Jones is the obvious answer. And when you look at why St. Joe's would want that, well, obviously they play in the same conference. They played this guy 4 times and didn't have as great a shooting game as 5 of 15 in the A10 tournament. But how about had 27 points at Glacier Arena in the season finale, was terrific in the Big 5 championship game, which is, it's just a shame that Meech Lilly got hurt. It wasn't that close of a game, but Deuce comes off the bench as 19 points. Like, they have seen the best of this guy and how good he can be. A lightning quick first step, a la what a Xzayvier Brown had. We'll get to the free throw line, a pit bull defender. Like, I think that is a very logical choice, and a guy who's only a sophomore as well. So I see that being a super logical choice. I mean, they're legitimately, they are as familiar as you can be with an opponent, being that they play so close. They played this guy 4 times. So certainly they need a scorer, and this dude's his attitude, his energy on both sides of the ball, I think, are exactly what you were looking for. That would lessen a blow and be as good as a replacement as you could have. The other is Jaden Glover, who put his name in from St. John's. Now, he put his name in the portal and he had a do not contact tag. That has since been rescinded because I saw the John Ross team put a list out today and Kentucky's after him. And hey, not just you have national programs you're going after. LaSalle and Temple are interested in this guy too. But interestingly enough, you had Jaden Glover he had St. Joe's in his final 8 schools before he had committed to St. John's. Justin Scott had a lot to do with that. So with him leaving, does that lessen his chances of going there? Clearly there's still some familiarity with the guys that they do have on staff. I think him transferring down after not playing a ton this year, would be a great spot for him to produce more. He'd be in a starting role. I think there'd be a lot of good that could come out of Jaden Glover for him to play more and produce more if he came down here. But I look at those 2 names, and not that that's that outside the box. Again, they're familiar with him. He's in the portal. It's exactly the move you'd think he'd make. Hey, you're not playing a lot at the Big East. Come down here and play. But Deuce Jones and Jaden Glover, I think, would be and look, you don't just simply replace the program's all-time leading scorer and Xzayvier Brown, who was the A10 Rookie of the Year, and then made an all-conference team this year and was set up to be a guy who could have been the A10 Player of the Year or certainly a first-teamer next year. You don't just simply do that. But getting a Jaden Glover, getting a Deuce Jones, that's a really good way to attempt to replace those guys. Again, you're not going to. You're not going to find upgrades over those guys of how good they are, what they meant to the program. But to get a scorer like Deuce Jones, he has 3 years of eligibility left. Scoring, you need a guy who's going to be able to handle the ball, have the ball in his hands a lot, get to the free throw line, make it happen, and then bring in a guy like Glover. I think those are 2 guys you make a push for St. Joe's. They are right now, and that would be a really good tandem to replace the guys that you're losing if you could do so.
100%. And you hit the nail on the head there, where you're not going to just fully replace someone like Xavier Brown and how much he meant to program the last couple of years. They do have some options though to try to get someone to be close to replicating what he could be, and maybe they'll have a new system and with obviously with Eric Reynolds, excuse me, gone too. Those were your not only primary ball handlers but also your top scorers, and they have to replace both now. So it'll be a new system, a new offensive system around whoever the personnel is, but we'll see who that is. It's going to be different for this year for sure. All right, Coach. Speaking of transfer portal, we're gonna do a little highlight of the rest of the portal that's going on so far and any updates that we may have. So first and foremost, we'll start with LaSalle. Only person who put their name in right now was Corey McKeithen. I don't know if he has eligibility. It's going to be a common theme you see here, not just with these schools, but just in general in college basketball. There's been a lot of people put their name in, and some we've gone over already, actually. But McKeithen's one of them where I don't know if he has eligibility, but it seems like all these players are going to try to wiggle their way for another year of eligibility with the NCAA. I don't know exactly how they're going to do that. Personally, I doubt that they're going to do that, but it's definitely something with that, to keep an eye on. So that's who's out for them. And then in for them, a few names. We have Rob Dockery coming over from Texas A&M. We have Jaden Johnson coming over from Old Dominion, and Edwin Daniel from Connor State, which is a JUCO school. So going the JUCO route there. And we talked about Demetri Gardner on the last episode. Of course, when we were talking about Augusta and the Masters and all that. Demetri Gardner decommitted actually from LaSalle this past week. So unfortunate loss there for LaSalle, but other people being brought in to kind of replace that a little bit. And I'm sure they will continue to be active. Looking at this list we have, besides those three, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other transfer portal commits that Darius Nichols has gotten so far, not even including high schoolers. So definitely they've been active in the transfer portal so far at LaSalle. For Temple, one person committing elsewhere, which also is a crossover with Villanova, which we'll mention in a little bit. Zion Stanford is the first inner Big Five transfer of this cycle, and he will be going from Temple to Villanova. Obviously, we know he met Temple's program the past couple years. Definitely thought he could be someone they would build around the next couple years, but he's taken his talents slightly outside the city limits to Villanova. At least he's staying in the Big Five, which is good because as we talked about in the last few episodes, Philly people staying in Philly. Zion Stanford's doing that, and it's going to be a good opportunity for him under new coach and Kevin Willard. They're going to be a talented team, and will he start for them? I don't know. If I had to say right now, I'd say probably not, just depending on who else they may bring in. But definitely could start for them, if not be a very, very high contributor off the bench for sure. Obviously, there's a lot more that we'll have to see there. Out at Villanova, Josiah Mosley, Chris Parker, Sashka Valyagov, and Enoch Boachi. Again, don't know if he has eligibility. I don't think he does. We'll see what the NCAA rules there, but another few portal entrants there. I think the big one there, Cope, is Josiah Mosley. He played a decent amount as a freshman this year. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes and how they can replace him. Chris Parker also wasn't as much of a contributor, but did play. He was a high recruit coming over from Alabama, who they were excited about. I'm personally most upset about Sash because I thought he was going to be someone, maybe not that they could build around, but someone who could at least contribute off the bench for them. Showed some flashes. Unfortunately, dealt with some injuries last year. But he, I was texting with our friend Tommy Golden, after he entered the portal, and Tommy said that, I think it's someone who could transfer down a little bit and play 15-ish minutes off the bench and contribute to a high mid-major program, like someone in the A10, someone in the Mountain West Conference, maybe the new Pac-12. We'll see, but that's definitely someone who can contribute and benefit from more playing time at a lower level. I definitely could see it. Definitely sad he's gone, though. And then in for them, besides Zion Stanford, Malachi Palmer coming over from Maryland, Chris Jeffrey, who was in the freshman class next year, was following Willard over from Maryland to Villanova as well. And Matthew Hodge, who did not play last year due to an eligibility issue, is staying at Villanova as well. Of course, we mentioned for St. Joe's, Xzayvier Brown. And I think on last episode, we mentioned Sean Simmons II is out for them. And then, of course, yes, Xzayvier Brown is committing elsewhere. For Penn, only new news here is a big recruit that they got. I know we mentioned William Crusay in the quick hitters cope, but TJ Power, a former top 100 recruit who originally committed to Duke, transferred to Virginia, didn't play a ton last year, now taking his talents to University City and is going to be playing for Fran McCaffrey and Penn. And I think that's a huge get for Fran McCaffrey. You don't see top 100 guys committing in the Ivy League very often. So this obviously had the academic rigors if he's going to Duke and Virginia, can translate that to Penn, but definitely a good get for Penn, excuse me, Cope, and you can elaborate on that as well once I turn it over to you because obviously you being a Duke fan and him staying in the ACC last year as well, you'll have a little more insight there on him. But a good get for Fran McCaffrey for sure. And then one more for Drexel Cope. We already talked about their three best players from last year who all committed to power conference schools elsewhere. We mentioned Kobe McGee earlier when we were talking about Cam Miles, but Jason Deuce Drake entered his name into the transfer portal this past week as well. So that's four starters now for Drexel last year who are not going to return for Zach Spiker's team, which we saw what happens when you have a lot of continuity. Not just for a national championship level, but even for competing in the top of your conference. Continuity matters even in this transfer portal era. So seeing four starters transfer elsewhere, and it is a good thing that they're all transferring up. I think that speaks volumes to Zach Spiker's progression and development of his players. But unfortunately, in this day and age, that this is going to happen and be a result of that with players trying to get a bag and trying to level up in their careers. I can't say I blame them necessarily, but it is a pitfall of the level of the nature of what we're in right now. So Cope, I know that was a lot of information. I'm going to shut up for a second and let you talk. We talked about Xzayvier Brown. I think I want to first start with Zion Stanford because it is an inner Big Five transfer. It's the first of this cycle. I want you to get to TJ Power after that, but not at this moment. But for Zion Stanford, how do you see him fitting in? And I know that team's not complete yet, but how do you see him fitting in with Kevin Willard's new look Villanova team?
Yeah, I certainly think he can play at this level. Even in a bench role, I certainly think he's a Big East guy. You saw what he could do at Temple, whether he came off the bench, whether it was, he really played well late in the season when a Quante Berry was in and out of the lineup, when Jamal Mashburn missed the last chunk of the season. Like, there was games where that offense fell onto his shoulders, and not only could he dish out some assists and play make a little bit, but he can score as well. I mean, he's always been that way. When he gets into the paint, can get to that spin move, can get to a turnaround jump shot. Like, he's certainly effective. Had some big games. He had a really good game against Drexel at Liacouras Center that we were both there for. So as a scorer, he can certainly play in this league. Now, his role, obviously, it's impossible to predict right now because they have three players or four with Hodge there who Willard recruited, which is cool that he's staying. You have him, you have Malachi Palmer, you have Chris Jeffrey, you have Zion. It's impossible to tell what the team is going to look like, especially if a Rodney Rice were to transfer there. Well, that's who's going to start at shooting guard or small forward is him. So hard to tell what his role will be, but even in a bench role, Kyle, he can score in this league. He can play in this league. And pretty cool that you have him and you have Bud Clark both played on the same West Catholic team, are both going to be playing in the Big East now against each other. Pretty cool for West Catholic, but yeah, he can score, and he's not going to be asked to do as much as he did later in the season, especially when it was like, hey man, like, and Steve Settle was hurt some games, like you need, or out some games, like you need to be the guy for us. Like, he's not going to run into that problem, so to speak. But I think with a better team around him in a better league, like, he can play here. He can play here. So I think it's a really good pickup. Like, I was a fan of him. I felt myself wanting more from him at times because I thought that he could be that guy that we saw against Drexel, that you saw against Tulsa when they won at Tulsa late in the year. Like, he certainly had some really good performances that I think with some more playing time, like, we could have seen more of. But bottom line is, I think he's a Big East player for sure. You get to weaken a rival as well, and Villanova becomes a feeder or continues to do what they did last year and just scrape off the top of the Big Five. But he's certainly a Big East player, Kyle. He's going to be even in a bench role, which I think that's what he'll be, because I think Willard's not done. They're bringing in a Caden Lewis, who's a 5-star recruit this weekend. Like, I think he will bring in guys who can start right now Zion's got 2 more years of eligibility that I think he'll stay for both, but he can play at this level. I'm excited to see what he can do. I think the flashes and the scoring is good enough, and when you see him at his best, that's a Big East player to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Um, like I said, like he can thrive in a multitude of different roles, and I do think like him not being relied on as the guy will absolutely help his efficiency and will help him focus on just playing in himself because, like you said, like I think sometimes I don't know the exact right way to describe it, but like you said, we were expecting a little bit more at certain times, like he did against Drexel, like he did against Tulsa later in the season, as you mentioned. That he has that ability, and I think if he's maybe not relied on to be the guy, especially in the Big East, he's going to be moving up a level. Obviously, he can play there; it's going to be harder, but I think it'll allow him to be more efficient, play within himself, and I think that will benefit him greatly. I think he's going to do really, really well for Villanova. And also, he seems to have liked playing in the city and staying home. So I would imagine if all goes well for him at Villanova, he'll stay his last 2 years and he'll play there for his 2 years, which is, it's a win-win, I think, for both parties. So it's a good get for Kevin Willard. It's unfortunate for Temple because, again, a guy who went to West Catholic, he's from here. You want to build around him and keep him for the last 2 years. And he could have been someone who could have been on an not All-American, but All-American Conference team at some point in the next couple of years. I think he definitely had that potential. So it's unfortunate to see him leave, but it is good that he's staying in the city. And I expect him to have a good role at Villanova for sure. Cope, one more thing real quick before we move on to just some coaching news that's relevant to the Big Five and we wrap up here. I wanted to touch on TJ Power and let you speak on that because that's something that like I said, we don't see very often as a former top 100 recruit making his way to the Ivy League and playing at Penn, playing for Fan McCaffrey now, who obviously has a ton of high major experience coaching at Iowa. This was his first real big get this past weekend. So I want to have you touch on that real quick. How much does TJ Power committing to Penn and Fran McCaffrey mean for this Quakers team? And what is he going to provide that maybe no one else has in the past, at least, the past few years for Penn?
Well, to get a get like this is, of course, massive. But you look at the connections here. Like, there's a guy that Fran McCaffrey recruited when he was at Iowa. So clearly it's a guy that he sees as like, hey, you didn't play much at Duke. Now, that Duke team that he played behind, they had Kyle Filipowski, had Jared McCain, but he also played behind Sean Stewart and Mark Mitchell as well. Like, there was bigs there, and there was guys that played his spot there that were better defensively, better rebounding-wise, that got that playing time over him. And that's his thing. Like, not a great defender, but as a guy who can space the floor, and here's another thing that I talked about earlier, that the front court, major question mark for Penn this year. How are they going to, first of all, find someone who can slide into Nick Spinoso's spot and just get better there? Get better there. Like, he could seamlessly, I think, transition into being the power forward on this team. It's in his name, but he could be the power forward. He could be the four on this team. A guy who can space the floor, has the size there, has been in college for some years, because it was kind of with them, it was like, hey, we're going to play two centers. We're going to play four guards and Spinoso. And, Braden Foster maybe not ready to contribute last year, having an injury and then getting into the fold later than the rest of his team was. Another thing was that I spoke about, not really a stretch player, not really a floor spacer at the 4 or 5 spot. Now with William Crusa and TJ Power, you have two of them. You have two of them now that can space the floor. So massive for their lineup construction with the skill sets of their bigs. But again, like, this guy with this pedigree, Kyle, not often you see him come down to the Ivy League. So he should be able to produce significantly more. I think there's a spot where they see that he's wanted. A spot, like a place where he will have a spot to play a lot. And then you look at last year, he was at Virginia, and he kind of gets caught in a bad spot. It's like, hey, with Tony Bennett retiring, do I stick it out here 1 year? Do I transfer and sit somewhere? He decided to stick it out 1 year, but I think there's a spot where it'll give him some stability. He'll have a starting spot. And I think he provides everything that Fran McCaffrey's play style wants and fills a need as well. Like Penn, with the two additions they've made, I certainly think their front court is in a better spot. Or I shouldn't say that because Nick Spinoso is a heck of a player and one of the best Penn guys that we've seen in recent memory, at least. But bottom line is, with him leaving, I like the two additions specifically to play into Fran McCaffrey's style. I think TJ Power is going to be excellent in playing fast and shooting threes at the four spot. I think he's going to be really good in Fran McCaffrey's offense.
I agree, and I can't wait to see it. All right, Cope. Couple quick things here before we sign off. Some coaching news relevant to the Big Five. We've got one in the American, South Florida. This is a really, really good hire. Hiring Tobin Anderson, former Iona coach, and of course, coach of Fairleigh Dickinson, who pulled off the second ever 16-1 upset over Purdue in the 2023 NCAA tournament. He's going to be on the South Florida bench. Really, really good hire. I don't think he should have been fired from Iona. I think it's a mistake that they did that. Being that they made I like to pronounce it like MAC, like a goat talking, because there's the MAC, of course, the Mid-American Conference. But they made their championship game this year, and they let him go. And it was surprising to everyone involved. So I think this is a home run hire for South Florida. North Texas, hiring Cleveland State's Danielle Robinson to replace Ross Hodge. He spent the last 3 seasons at Cleveland State. He took over for Dennis Gates when he took off from Missouri. 3 straight 21 seasons. They did make the CBI championship this year, Cope. They lost to Illinois State. So another very relevant coaching hire, obviously, with Temple being in the American. And then we turn our focus over to the Big East. And another team that made some noise in March, High Point. Alan Huss is leaving High Point to go over to Creighton, where he had coached from 2017 to 2023 before taking the job at High Point. But he's going to be their head coach in waiting for when Greg McDermott retires. I think I saw on Twitter that it's going to be within the next couple of years. I know we were talking earlier on the phone and said probably 3 at most. So somewhere in that 2 to 3 year range, I think, or at least 1 to 3 year range, I think, until Alan Huss takes over. But High Point's been a highly successful program the last 2 years. They, I think, were the 1 seed in the Big South and then lost in 2024. And then this year, I don't even know if they were the 1 seed, but they did end up winning the conference tournament, obviously. And they probably should have beaten Purdue. They made a ton of mistakes in that game. Purdue didn't shoot the ball very well, but they did end up escaping and then obviously making the Sweet 16. But High Point's been the team to beat in the Big South the last 2 years, so I think it's a really good hire. Obviously, very familiar with Creighton. Not only coached there, but played there from 97 to 01 under Dana Altman. He played with Kyle Korver, who obviously went on to have a very long NBA career. So this is a really, really good hire by Greg McDermott to say, hey, this is my guy. I'm going to hang it up soon. Take over for me when I'm done. Cope, your reactions to any of these hires made that irrelevant to the Big Five?
Yeah, I really like Tobin Anderson. Good dude. Like, it's unfortunate what happened at Iona. Now, he did get replaced by a Philly guy, Dan Giroux, who's from Springfield, was a really good player at Springfield High, but he made the MAC championship in his second year, and he basically had 2 completely different teams from year 1 to year 2. Pitino, like, those guys go, Walter Clayton was not going to stay at Iona. Obviously, he wins a national championship, and Dennis Jenkins goes to St. John's, and people depart and go their separate ways, but he returned 1 guy from Pitino's teams, and then basically all of them left. He had to replace him again and was still able to make the MAC championship. He's, by all accounts, a good dude, a really good coach. It's a shame. But the thing is, with these mid-majors, you're seeing out-of-box hires, or maybe they take a guy like Dan Giroux, who's like, hey, he has NBA experience. He might know people with some money, and a guy like that who can bring in donor support, albeit being a really good coach who's coached at the top of this profession. Perhaps that's a guy that just was more in favor with the administration and the boosters at Iona as opposed to a Tobin Anderson. Totally got the short end of the stick, but he's in a good spot working under a very good head coach in Brian Hodgson. this team will be one of the best in the AAC next year, Kyle. But good that he landed on his feet, gets a top assistant job, moves up leagues as well. That's a pretty good progression for him. Like, think about this. Like, even 4 years ago, he was coaching D2 St. Thomas Aquinas in Sparkill, New York, just north of the Jersey border. Then goes to Fairleigh Dickinson, pulls off the biggest upset we've ever seen. Then goes to Iona, the top dog in the MAC. Now he's moving up. He's right on the cusp of being in a Power 5 league. So he's on his feet. Very, very happy for him. Not happy for Temple, though, because that team's going to be, I believe, very good. They as they put the piece together, the South Florida Bulls will be very good. And then for Alan Huss, I'm surprised we haven't seen this maybe more often. I mean, I'm sure there's not a specific case like this one where it's like, hey, we have a guy who like played here, he coached here a while, like had 2 really good years at High Point. But just I'm a little surprised maybe we haven't seen this situation where it's like somebody gets named like that, where hey, maybe you have these older coaches that don't want to play the NIL game and they don't want to play ball and do that. I mean, well, you've seen it.
There's one that I remember. It was Boeheim, who named Hopkins his coach in waiting, I think.
And then he left.
And then he went to go to Washington.
He got to go to Washington.
No, that's the only one that I can remember where like someone did something like this specifically. I mean, besides Fran Dunphy and Aaron McKee, I think that was the one other example too. Obviously very relevant to us, but yeah, it doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, and you can even look at Duke, and it was like that job was like, hey, could it be Johnny Dawkins? Could it be Tommy Amaker? But sure enough, it was Shire who was already there. So, but the fact that they've come out and say this, I think it's very, very smart. You basically are telling McDermott, like, you can take your time. Huss is going to be here for a second stint. He's already got enough experience and probably in due time was ready to take over a gig like this or get a promotion like this to a Power 5 league, if you want to include the Big East anyway. So I believe he's a damn good coach, a school he's been at, loves, played at. Really good coach the last 2 years at High Point. I think this is a good hire when it becomes the case. I think he'll be a really good head coach at Creighton whenever that day comes. But it's good to be familiar with your foe, Kyle. So I like to put this at the end. It can be your kind of version of the quick hitters, but I think it's relevant that we do touch on this stuff, even if it's more of a national scope. Like this Alan Huss news, like, yeah, he might just be the right-hand man to Greg McDermott for a year or two. But in due time, we will know who he is, because he's going to coach Creighton. I think he's going to do a damn good job when he's there, especially with revenue share. We could go down a whole rabbit hole like that, but these Big East schools will have a lot of money. I think he's a really good coach. He'll beat a program that's going to be in the top of the NCAA as far as spending for men's basketball. I think it's a perfect storm for him to sit there, continue to get experience, and take over whenever Greg McDermott decides to hang it up.
Yeah, and it's especially relevant for Villanova fans and Big 5 fans because in all likelihood, he's going to be the one doing the heavy bulk of the recruiting. Being that he's going to be the one taking over in 2 to 3 years, whatever the timeline may be, but it's not so far away where he's like, hey, go bring some guys in, take some load off my shoulders, me being Greg McDermott right now, but take some load off my shoulders. And he's going to be one out there on the recruiting trail, and he's going to be recruiting high schoolers. He's going to be probably doing the main bulk of transfer portal starting next year. Obviously this year, sure, but there's a lot has happened already, obviously. So it's not going to be quite as extensive this year in the transfer portal, but starting next year, absolutely. So it's a big deal, and it's very relevant to Villanova fans, and then by extension, Big 5 fans as well. Cope, we're just about at the end here. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, all good from me. I'm ready for the weather to start warming up. All I can think about is going down the beach. As soon as like hoops turns off, man, I just want to go sit on the beach somewhere. I want to go see, you know what I want to do? I want to go sit on the beach. I want to get there early in the morning. I want to stop at the Wawa and Sea Isle and grab me a coffee. I'm going to set up my umbrella so I don't get sunburned even that early in the morning. You know what I want to do, Kyle? I want to read A Soaring Season by Aaron Bracey on the beach. I also would love to read A Soaring Season on a beach. I need to do that. I need to do that very, very badly. All of that you just said. Yeah. We need to get you out on a golf course too, by the way. I know you're anti, but Dorn's trying to get me back on. Our buddy Dorn's trying to get me back on.
Listen, I'm not good.
We will see.
So it's okay if you don't think you're good. I offered to be on
the course in the past, but I said, hey, like, I would drive the golf cart so you guys could have a good time. I just required somebody buy me a cigar so I could hang out for a little.
It's a good time. You got to get back on the course.
Yeah. I do have one thing I must say though that I'd be remiss if I didn't, and that
Okay.
would be it is going to be your birthday this weekend. So happy
It is
birthday to
true.
you. I
Thank
know
you.
you serenaded me, you sung to me when it was my birthday, and I'm not going to do that
It's okay.
quite like that. But the next time we record, it will have been Kyle's birthday. We're going to celebrate Friday night and have a good time. But happy birthday to you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Very nice of you, Cope. Yes, my birthday is on Monday, 21st. So yeah, crazy. 2-6, Cope. Big old 2-6.
You're right in your prime, man. You're ready for a
I'm in
supermax.
my athletic prime and I'm constantly injured and never do anything except play softball. So, and golf. Anyway, yes, thank you, Cope. I appreciate the kind words, of course, and appreciate you. Excited to celebrate this weekend for sure. So, with that being said, thank you all for tuning in as always. Of course, if you want to keep doing that, you can find us on YouTube. You can find our audio only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you want to follow any social media updates, go to Twitter and Instagram at Big Five Pod. You can find us there. Yeah, that's it for this one. 118 is done, and we will see you next time.